So Evil came out on Netflix this past week, and it had been previously released in 2019, but just started airing on Netflix in October of 2020 ahead of a second season. It's received generally favorable reviews, and I have to say that when I initially started watching it, I actually had a very good first impression. And I pretty much liked it right away. Each episode is about 45 minutes long, and it is about a forensic psychologist and a priest who team up together to investigate miracles and demonic possessions. So, I was initially only going to watch one episode, but I feel like by the fourth episode, they were hitting their stride. I binged 4 episodes, and had time allowed, I would have watched more. I think that there were maybe 10 episodes, and I would have watched them all. So I'm going to go back and watch them, but I only watched the first 4. So each episode, I feel like supernatural dramas or science fiction shows, things like that, in my experience, and I've been watching movies or shows like this since the 90s, since I was a kid. And I feel like these shows always start out doing the quote monster of the week type of episodes, and then they kind of start building their own mythology like in the background, giving little bits of detail here and there in each episode. And then typically like the second or the third season, it gears more towards the overarching theme, plot, the bigger story. So I think that's what is happening here, which I'm not mad at that formula. I grew up based on shows like that, and I'm all for nostalgia, and I definitely felt nostalgic vibes. I would say it was, because there's a skeptic and there's a believer in this show, as the main characters. It had definite Mulder and Scully vibes from X-Files. And then also, other similar duos like in Castle and Bones. I'm less familiar with those shows. I did binge Castle for a while, but that was years and years ago. And Bones, I saw even less, but I did watch it because of David Boreanaz, who I watched in Buffy and Angel, which I loved. So I'm going to go and kind of summarize each episode in a little bit, in more detail. So there are going to be spoilers if you haven't seen the show and you don't want it spoiled. Come back and watch after you've watched the show. Or if you're like me and you don't care if it's spoiled because you're going to watch it anyway, but you're just impatient and you have to know what happens, then you can keep watching. So the first episode is called Genesis. We meet our titular title characters. The first person that we meet, her name is Kristen Bouchard. She's a mother of 4, and she is the forensic psychologist. She has a husband who we don't see, who she tells her daughters, is off climbing mountains, and he's guiding tours on these mountain climbs. But you see that she's having money trouble, and you kind of gather that maybe they were having marital problems. Then there's David Acosta, who Kristen Bouchard and David Acosta their paths cross because they're both kind of working to determine if she's trying to determine the mental capacity or the mental state of a serial killer, and the Catholic priest in training, who's David Acosta, is trying to determine if this guy is demonic or he's having a demonic possession, because he works for the Catholic Church, and they send out investigators to determine if any of these stories, supposed miracles or demonic possessions, have any credit. So they cross paths that way. And then Kristen is having money problems, as I said, and he recruits her to work with him. I'm trying to remember why. I think she just wasn't getting what she wanted from her job. I think the person she was working for was trying to get her to lie because she was saying she needed more time to determine the serial killer's sanity. So anyways, they team up because the priest in training is a believer. She's a skeptic. He needs somebody to balance him out to really determine the validity of these cases. There's a third person who kind of rounds out the skepticism, and he is a contractor who works with David. His name is Ben Shakir, also a skeptic. So in this first episode, I don't remember if I said the name of the episode, but it's episode 1 is called Genesis. So Kristen starts getting visited by a demon at night. The demon calls himself George. So she is a psychologist. She's thinking, okay, this is a dream. This is all in my head. This isn't real. It's fine, but it's terrifying for her because he makes inappropriate comments. Like he goes and talks about her C-section scar and her underwear and goes to like cut off fingers in her dream, and she's trying to stay calm because she knows it's not real. But he says some things to make her think that, to make her second guess if this is real. So apparently there's a part of the brain that is dormant when you're sleeping that can read. That's why I guess you can't read in your dreams, or you can't press, I don't know, for me, in my dreams when I try and call somebody, my fingers don't work. I don't know if that's the same thing. But she puts a sign above her bed to see if she could read it, and she can't read it. So she's like, definitely dreaming. This isn't real. So when David and Kristen go back and talk to the serial killer, they find that he has a demon in him named Roy. Roy knows George. Roy talks about George, and Kristen is freaked out because she's never told anybody except her therapist about George. So she goes back to her therapist. It's like, who'd you tell? What happened? Whatever. Where are my therapy notes? So they go get her therapy notes, but they're gone. There were a couple points during the show where I got goosebumps, which definitely tells me that it was a pretty well done show if it's going to give me goosebumps. So I think one part where I got goosebumps was when Roy was talking about George. So Kristen finds out that there is this like rival / really evil therapist, like that we don't know a lot about him, but he's very weird. His name is Leland. She finds out that he went in to supposedly get a appointment with her therapist under that guise to steal her therapy notes to use against her. Kind of like a good versus evil kind of thing to hold over her, to basically discredit her. So Leland wound up giving her therapy notes to the serial killer, and that is, she determines how he knows about George because she talked to her therapist about her dreams. Later on, they find out that the serial killer is actually not possessed at all. He used his wife's password to get on her computer to go in these really messed up chat rooms to talk about his screwed up fantasies, and Leland finds him. Leland teaches this guy how to act insane or how to act possessed. That's kind of how that one ended. And obviously you can kind of see that there's a bigger story that you're starting to get bits and pieces of. You're really curious about Leland. And so because of that, I watched the second episode. So the second episode is called 177 Minutes. And in this episode, we learn that Kristen has a daughter. One of her 4 daughters has a heart problem, and they don't expect her to live past 20. Unless her heart starts getting better on its own, she could just drop dead at any minute. Which, oh my god, that is so fucking sad. Her daughter, the one with the heart problem, I think it's the same one with the heart problem, starts seeing the same demon at night. She starts seeing George. And Kristen in her mind keeps going back and forth because she's sure it's a dream, but then how is her daughter dreaming about the same demon? He says the same things to her. He does the same things to her. And we learn about somebody named Julia from David Acosta's life. And he started seeing visions after she died. We don't know who she is. We assume maybe it was a girlfriend or a wife, somebody important to him, but that's all we know so far about Julia, is that she was in his life and she's no longer in his life, so I think she's dead. So Leland gets recruited to take Kristen's old job, and he is working to basically undo all the good work that she has done, to put anybody who is actually evil and guilty out on the streets, and then innocent people into the prison system. So he has an agenda. And then we see that the Catholic Church has sent David and Kristen to investigate a supposed miracle at a hospital where a girl who had been dead for 3 hours suddenly comes back to life. They're reviewing hospital tapes and they see this apparition that appears to be an apparition, and they're trying to debunk it. And the apparition is another woman that died, but that they see her spirit on tape. And he wants to look into it further, takes it to his boss at the Catholic Church. I don't know whose boss is. I don't know what they're called. But he takes it to them and they're like, we're not worried about it. Move on to the next case. So he tables that. So Kristen comes home one night and her daughters are watching this scary movie. She takes a closer look and she notices that the demon looks a lot like the demon that visits her at night and that visited her daughter. And she thinks, oh, okay, great. So my daughters watch this movie. That's where she's getting this from. And I must have seen this somewhere and then subconsciously conjured this guy in my nightmares. So she's feeling a lot better about it. And then this episode ends with David taking drugs. He went to some kind of a club to acquire drugs, and he goes back home and he starts seeing visions. And he's like levitating on his bed. And that's where that episode ends. So episode 3 is called 3 Stars. And at the beginning of this episode, it appears that David is still hallucinating, because at points you see him doing things and Leland is kind of like in the back of his head. Like you see him kind of antagonizing David and talking to him. And I'm like, okay, well, he's not really there. Like, are you hallucinating him? Like, who is Leland? What is this guy's deal? And then I wrote on here, is he supposed to be the devil? Because he'll say certain things that make you think that he's the devil in human form. So that is my guess so far. We still haven't learned much about him. He's just this ominous presence. And I don't know if this is the same episode, but another reason that makes me think that he's like demonic or something is Kristen tries to record her conversation with him on audio tape, and you only hear her in the conversation. His voice is damaged or just isn't able to be recorded in some way. The first part of his voice is, but the rest of the conversation is not. So I think that Ben said like he used some kind of equipment to like scramble his voice, but like, did he know he was being recorded, or is it because he's a demon and I don't know why it started recording his voice and then it stopped recording. I don't really know. But Leland keeps threatening Kristen's daughters. He keeps threatening their lives. And he keeps telling Kristen that she doesn't know what she's dealing with and she needs to leave it alone. But he does keep hinting at something bigger that she doesn't understand and needs to leave it alone. So the big case, or the monster of the week for this episode, is they are investigating a possible demonic possession of a, I guess, theater director. His assistant calls them in because there are certain things that are happening that make her think that she needs the Catholic Church's help. And it turns out that he's just being hacked by a disgruntled IT guy. However, he supposedly stopped harassing him days before. But when they showed up, it was something else. And then whoever or whatever was hacking him started hacking Ben and his sister, and then Ben finds out his sister had a baby. We don't really know. I guess that was just left open for future episodes, but the show makes you think, okay, this is explainable, but then it's not. So it's like, we don't really know what ultimately was. It started out as a person hacking this theater director, and then now it's something else, and then it's getting into the other investigators' lives too, and they can't explain it. So you think that everything is okay. The theater director turns his life around, he becomes a nice guy, everything's great, but then he gets a message, like some anonymous computer message saying, I think it said something like hell is only half full, and then something in him switches, and he walks through the office, out one of the doors on the balcony, jumps off the building, and then we don't know anything else about why that happened. The next episode is a completely different subject, so that's where that one ends. Actually, it ends with so Ben is able to do a deep fake based off of the first part of Kristen's conversation with Leland to fill in the blanks where his voice is missing on the tape. So Kristen uses that to discredit Leland in court and to basically get him fired from his court job so that he can't continue in his quest to let out evil people and jail innocent people. Episode 4, which actually was my favorite so far, and this is the episode that made me really think that they were starting to get into their groove and that this was going to be a show that I stuck with and would watch the next season and would, continue to be binge-worthy. I do really enjoy finding new shows that are a formula that I enjoy, that give me vibes or nostalgia from other shows that I loved, but that are new. I guess we're all creatures of habit, but I really like the show for those reasons. So episode 4 is called Rose 390. This one was pretty messed up by a child psychopath. And so this family moves into this house. They've been there for a couple weeks, and they've got a boy, an older daughter, and I don't know if the daughter's older than the boy or they're around the same age, and then they have a baby. The boy is suddenly acting very different, trying to poison his family, and he's particularly hateful towards the baby. So they lock themselves in one room at night to sleep. They lock him in his room alone. They're freaked out. They call in the Catholic Church, and Ben is in the back, he's looking for environmental factors, a reason for why 2 weeks ago this boy suddenly wants to kill his family. So he's looking in the shower head and sees what he thinks is like copper. So he's thinking, okay, well, it must be like some kind of poisoning to make this boy act bizarre. There's some kind of environmental element that is to blame. So Kristen is freaked out because she doesn't know if this demon that she and her daughter are seeing in their dreams is real or not. So she sends Ben over to her house at some point to test her pipes as well. And there are some funny moments. So Ben's in the daughter's room and he hears them come in. He's like, there's a strange man in your bathroom. Your mom told me to come in. It's cool, whatever. And they're like, what are you doing? And he's like, checking for copper to see if you're psychopaths. And I just thought that was hilarious because it's so my humor. I have really dark, twisted humor, very inappropriate humor, and it was funny. So the grandmother brings home these 3D goggles, and these girls start playing this scary game, and they get a user called Rose 390, which is presenting themselves as another little girl. And they accept her invitation, and then she comes into the game, and she brings up this Ouija board and gets the girls to invite this demon in, and they have to do this chant. And Ben is in the bathroom getting these samples to test, and he's like, what is that? He walks in, and then the girls stop chanting, and he gets the goggles to look and see. And when he looks through the goggles, the demon is only like partially out of the book, like frozen behind the girls, and the girls are just like, and he's like, and it is Very, very, very funny. It's just one of those moments that's very subtle but very effective, and I thought was hilarious. Oh, it tells them to say hail 3 times. And when the demon, see, I'm looking at my notes and I had skipped over some parts. So as the girls say hail 3 times, the demon comes out of the board and says now they can really play. So once he sees what the girls are playing with, he tries to put parental controls on the game, but it doesn't work because at night the goggles glow or get the girls' attention in some way, and the supposed little girl is there trying to get them to play again. So the video, this episode kind of wraps up where David is trying to mentor this really troubled kid. He likes comic books. He wants to be a comic book artist. So David wants to mentor him because David used to be really into comic book drawing as well. He comes over and the little boy is sitting outside and Ben's like, it's kind of bright out here, let's go inside. And he's like, no, I want to stay here. And David had made the mistake of telling him if he really wanted something hard enough, all he had to do was pray. Well, apparently all he wanted was his baby sister to die. So he wrapped her up in a blanket and put her at the bottom of the pool. And I don't know how long she had been there. It's weird. Like, if you really want... Sometimes there are little things that don't make any sense because it's like, okay, if he really wanted his baby sister to die, David didn't notice her at first. Why didn't he just go inside with him unless he was possessed and part of him wanted for David to see what was happening and save her, which he did. He was like, oh my gosh, he realized that it was a baby in the pool. He jumps in and I'm like sitting there like, oh my God, on pins and needles because those things are so hard. Even though I know it's not real, this is a fantastical show that couldn't happen. So I'm sitting there like, oh my God, please let the baby be alive. And then the baby lives. And the parents are genuinely freaked out. They feel like they have no other option. They don't know that the church ultimately will decide to do an exorcism. So David heads back over to their house with Kristen and another priest who's going to do the exorcism. And they get there and there's a police officer in front of the car in the house. And you obviously know something bad has happened. When they get there, the mother and father say to them, the boy has run away. But then the police officer's talking to the father in one of the rooms about blood on the wall. And then the mother basically kind of like alludes to the fact that she had to protect her family and obviously they killed their evil son. And after that part, I got goosebumps again because it's really heavy material and so sad. That was a hard one, but it was my favorite one so far because I felt like it was just like the best overall. It was the most interesting. So I'm excited to see the rest of them. My next videos are going to be on Monsterland and the Book of Blood. So I am on a binge with recording and I've been recording for 26 minutes and I need to be in bed by midnight and it's like 10:47. I don't have a lot of time in the day because I have a 1-year-old. But I'm trying to make it work. So those will be my next videos. If you saw this show, let me know what you think about it. If you have other show suggestions, let me know what those are. If you like the video, like it. And subscribe if you want to see more of these kinds of videos.